So, ladies and gentlemen, please, now we have some very interesting responses to our problems, and perhaps we have also different opinions. All the panelists sent us some very beautiful slides, but I think we should take back some of the time that the late start caused some delays. Therefore, I think it would be much more interesting to have a real debate on this technical solution to the economical and productive environment, since we have some industry leaders and experts. So I leave the floor to the two moderators and obviously to Leo, who a little bit designed this section, and I thank him and all of you for this. Thank you for being here.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, and welcome to the conference session on new fuels, new technologies, and old challenges. And I'll start by saying thank you to the audience and to Studio Legale Lauro for organising this splendid event. Marpol Annex 6 is now less than 15 months away, and fuel has suddenly become a hot topic in the shipping industry, with owners forced to decide how they're going to meet these new restrictions when they come into force at the start of 2020. Now, I've just seen some statistics from DNVGL, and according to them, fewer than 2,000 vessels have either had scrubbers fitted or have booked the yard slots to get the work done. So with the clock counting down, the working assumption has to be that 95% of owners are going to be looking to alternative types of fuels instead. Now, my name is David Osler. I'm a London-based journalist with LloydsList.com, the shipping website. I've covered various aspects of the industry for over 20 years, including environmental issues. And with me this morning is one of the very few journalists who can have been writing about shipping for even longer than I have, and that's Terry Macalister, who's going to moderate this session jointly with me. We're going to use a straightforward question and answer format, asking this fantastic panel to answer some of the questions that we have prepared. So let me introduce the speakers to you in alphabetical order. Franco Del Manso is Manager of International Environmental Affairs at Unione Petrolifera, the trade association representing refineries in Italy. He has a background in petroleum products research. Leo Drollas is best known as former chief economist at the Centre for Global Energy Studies think tank in London. He's widely quoted by broadcasters and newspapers worldwide. Voltner Galke is general manager at Winterthur Gas and Diesel, and his resume also includes time spent with other leading diesel engine manufacturers and engineering companies. Lorenzo Matacena is director of Caronte and Tourist, the Italian ferry operator, and in addition he has numerous other shipping company boardroom positions. It's good to see my old friend Ugo Salerno again. Ugo, of course, is chairman of the Italian Classification Society, RINA, and is a distinguished past chairman of the International Association of Classification Societies. And finally, Tracy Vowel concentrates on the refined oil products market for Argus Consulting. She started life as a refined products engineer and has also worked as a trader, so pretty all-round experience there from Tracy. And now for the questions for panelists. I'll start with Ugo. Ugo, you tell me you're an enthusiast for new types of fuels. So in the long run, what are the options for owners beyond low sulfur fuel oil? Can we have a mic for Ugo, please? Yeah. Okay.
First of all, let me thank Francesco. Even if we are hosted in these modest places, but we are very happy because of being with him to come to Naples every year. Thank you, Francesco. You are always doing better, and it is really fantastic that you let our friends know the city of Naples. I'm a Neapolitan, so I'm very proud about it. Sorry for this, but I took 2 seconds. About fuels, of course, I think that in today's world, we are living 2 extremely important revolutions. One is digitalization, the other one is energy. And energy is becoming of paramount importance also because of the climate changes, etc. And also because of the requirement of the community towards various industries in order to reduce the emissions. So why I am fond about new technology? In general, I like new technology because it is the job of my company, and therefore it is one of the reasons for which I am following very closely, but also because we need different solutions compared to today to reach the targets that are imposed on us by the community. Think to, for example, even COP23, the Bonn meeting, the last meeting on environmental matters, that is continuing to increase the let's say the level, the targets, in order to keep within the 1.5 degrees growth of the temperature of Earth. The reason why, as I told you, is if we speak about shipping, is also because we have been imposed a very ambitious target. By 2050, we have to reduce by 50% the emissions of the industry, not of the vessels, of the industry, compared to 2008, with, I don't know, maybe my friends know better than me, but which will be the volume of traffic in 2050 compared to 2008? And we have to reduce by 50%, which means that we have to reduce by, what, 75, 80, 85% the emissions of each single vessel, today single vessel. So what are the solutions? The solutions are not necessarily what we have today, even if we have, and I think we will speak a lot about this, some interim solution. Think to scrubbers, think to LNG. The solution is to work, as before was said by Panos Laskaridis, for example, with fuels that have no carbon content. And there is only one fuel that has no carbon content, that is hydrogen. Of course, we are speaking of something that is already a reality, even if not widely applied. But the solution is to work on the technology for hydrogen. Hydrogen can be used on engines, but I don't think it is the right use of hydrogen. The real right use of hydrogen is on fuel cells. But we can discuss afterwards, if you like.
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you for that. Thank you for those observations, Hugo, which leads logically to Volkmar as the engineering guy on the panel. From your point of view, from a company like Winterthur's point of view, what are the technical challenges surrounding the new fuels, and what will be the impact for ship owners, I guess? Oh, lend him your mic. Or...
Hello? Yeah, now it's working. Hello. Yeah, thanks for the question, and I'd like to take up a few words from Hugo, because it's right. How is seaborne traffic developing? And predictions say seaborne traffic is doubling until 2050. So as you say, then the reduction has to be much more. And I think we, as an engine designer, we are also obliged to think about what to do with the engine, and do we think the engine is the main propulsion system in the future? For us, as we see it, with the power density required for seagoing vessels, the only way to do these long-haul trips is with a combustion engine. But simply saying, sorry for my French, shit in, shit out. So if you put sulfur in, you get sulfur out. So you either have clean fuels to go in, or you have something to clean the exhaust gases. That leads us to scrubbers. For our point of view, an intermediate fuel, lot of people are talking about LNG is the solution. I think LNG is a bridging fuel, so that until 2050 LNG will play a role. The engines are developed for LNG, and also there might be a mix of fuels on board, low sulfur fuels, ultra low sulfur fuels. Then you need to combine the technologies on board, so it's a very, very heavy investment also for the ship owners. Very difficult to predict how prices are developing. What is going on with HFO? Is HFO starting from 2020 to go up, the price, or is it going down? Is HFO around? I think HFO will be around, but then we have to talk about supply. If everybody wants to have 0.1 sulfur or 0.5 sulfur, for example, Singapore, let's say they have 100 barges there. They have 98 barges with clean fuel. Do we have only 2 barges left with HFO? So everybody can say how the price will go. So it's very difficult to predict, but from the engine point of view, to conclude on this, we are looking into different fuels, cleaner fuels, alternative fuels, so that's all done. And the technology was, from my point of view, never hindering. The technology will be there as soon as the requirements are clear, and we know what kind of fuel, clean fuel, alternative fuels are to be used.
Okay, and Volkmar, is this purely a consideration for owners considering new buildings, or is retrofitting going to be prohibitively expensive?
Another good question. Depends on the technology. I think that on scrubbers, you definitely have a nice opportunity for retrofits. If you take a VLCC, for example, having, let's say, 17,000 tons of fuel used per year, you have a price difference of $300, $350 US per ton on clean fuels compared to HFO. The payback period is almost half a year for a scrubber, excluding installation costs, yeah? But plus minus, take it 1 year, but that's a fantastic example for retrofit. As it comes to LNG, there's a lot of vessels out there, not a lot, but a couple of vessels out there which are called LNG ready. Honestly speaking, I think they will stay LNG ready forever. If you do LNG, then you should do it from the beginning, because if you apply LNG, you need an expensive tank that has to be compiled, or let's say designed for the voyage you do, bigger tank, more cost. Then you have an LNG handling system, then you have to modify the engine to an LNG engine. And so if you take all this into consideration, then you also have to apply HFO equipment on board for heat treatment and heating and stuff. So it's obsolete, that equipment. So again, a trap. So for LNG, I would say retrofitting and LNG ready ships to be transferred into LNG, not likely. I would say LNG only for new builds.
Okay, thanks. Next, a question for Tracy and Franco, because you two are the oil industry people on the platform. I guess, like the rest of us, you will have seen predictions of widespread chaos on 1st of January 2020, when everybody wants to buy low sulfur fuel oil, and there might not be enough of it available in the right ports at the right time, and maybe not at the right price. So, ladies first, Tracy, how do you see things unfolding in 2020?
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Yes, there have been reports of widespread chaos. If you look at I think there was a very famous BP graph that was going around fuel oil usage, and basically they had 2020 whited out, grayed out. Nobody knows what's going on. To be honest, I think now that the industry is moving forward more and more, that time period where there may be chaos has become shorter and shorter. And let's say it's not going to kick in right on 2020. People are going to start switching over to ensure that their tanks are cleaned and their lines are cleaned out, and people are going to start producing, we think, in middle of 2019. We do believe that there will be enough low sulfur fuel out there, regardless of whether it's marine gas oil or a fuel oil mix. What does happen is the question of availability. And to be honest, it'll probably be what we pick up from the industry, it'll be very easy to be able to get a 0.5% fuel oil in the top, or 0.5% sulfur fuel in the top 10 ports out of the world. When you go into the secondary ports, such as the top 30 ports out of the world, you may end up, it may be a little bit more spotty, but the fuel oil or the fuel will be available. When you start looking at the tertiary ports, we actually think that there will only be 0.5% fuel available, and it will probably be 0.5% marine gas oil. The more bigger concern that people have had is whether, if they install a scrubber, whether they will actually be able to get high sulfur fuel oil in every single port. So it will have an effect on price though, because remember, this is some 200 million tons a year of high sulfur fuel oil demand that is going to be displaced. We estimate that there's only going to be about 50 million tons, even if you go up to the 2,000 ships that will have scrubbers in, some 50 million tons that will be scrubbed. So that is 150 million tons of fuel that's going to need to be replaced. And maybe, I was about to say, Franco may want to talk a bit more on the refining side, so I won't go on and on.
Yes. Thank you. The problem is very big for refining industry. The point is that the bunker fuel is no more a byproduct. Is a product that we have to produce for shipping industry. And the solution is not the same in the refining industry. Each refinery has its own configuration. And there is no time to change the configuration. So each refinery will produce the bunker that the refinery is able to produce. So we will have a lot of product, and the fuel mix for the shipping industry will change completely. We can have marine gas oil, we can have heavy fuel oil or mixing with some low sulfur component, and we can have heavy distillate for meet the 0.5 specification in 2020. Naturally, each of these products have its own cost, and the impact of the fuel change on cost of shipping could be very, very big. Today we have a range between 500 and 800 dollars per tons, and these three products can be positioned inside this range if the condition of the crude oil market do not change in the future.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Franco. So we'll turn now to Leo for some of the big picture. Leo, I can't swear that the shipping industry is going to be ready for 2020, but will the oil and refinery industry be?
Well, if I may confine my thoughts to shipping, because I believe that most of the shippers are not aware of what's coming, and they have delayed their responses. Some, like Mr. Grimaldi I spoke with earlier, said that he has already, with his company, he's investing in scrubbing as a short-term solution, which I think is the best way to meet this problem. But of course, the scrubbing capacity is not great enough to be able to help most shipping. About 980 to 1,000 ships already have either installed or have ordered, but that's still a long way from the vessels that are needed to be changed. But the cost now, I think we haven't mentioned cost so far. In order to give you an idea, heavy fuel oil in the Mediterranean at the moment is around $450, $460 a ton. They have done calculations that it would probably need another $200 at least per ton to provide the lower sulfur fuels as mandated. Now that is a huge change, and that doesn't take into account the basis of all oil product pricing, which is the crude oil itself. Now today we have $81 today actually for Brent, and this, depending on how this IMO directive goes, it could increase the demand for crude by maybe 500,000 barrels a day, maybe more. Some people say 1 million, some people even say 1.5 million. Now, can you imagine what that does with Venezuela having these huge problems, with Iran being sanctioned? The price of oil could go to $100, $120, more than it was in 2008, where we had the big crisis. So I think people are underestimating the huge cost involved. And for shipping, fuel costs are the biggest variable cost by far. So to add that kind of cost component, you might say it'll affect everyone, all right, yes. But as an industry, it will be affected quite severely, and would affect, of course, the cost of transporting all kinds of goods, bulk commodities and otherwise. So I think it's a very serious problem, which maybe the industry needs to pay even more attention to, and the refining industry too. And refineries, may I add just one final point, refineries are businesses. They will not produce fuels, and it's always a combination of fuels a refinery will produce. You have to look at the gross product worth of the barrel versus the crude oil price. So if the mix of product prices are not right to produce the new low sulfur heavy fuel oil, refineries won't do it. So there'll be quite a bit of heavy high sulfur fuel oil available, so the people who have invested in scrubbers will do much better than others.
Are you surprised at the low take-up?
I'm sorry, I didn't...
Are you surprised at the relatively low take-up of scrubbers?
Well, ship owners, obviously, it's like investing $5, $6, $7 million in equipment. If they will always wait till the last moment to see what's going to happen. They've always been like that, especially the smaller ship owners. So I'm not surprised, but they will have to pay more and more attention as the days go by, as we speak even. Thank you.
Yeah, and
okay. Sorry, go on, Volkmar. Yeah.
Just to, from a technical point of view, you can't produce more scrubbers as you can do at the moment. So the capacity on the scrubber producers is full, and the scrubbers are at the moment 1.7 to 2.5 millions, and then the economy of scales will kick in, and then later on they will also go down these prices. But at the moment it's also it's not possible.
Okay, well, after hearing those observations about ship owners, I'll turn to the ship owner on the stage, and that's Lorenzo. Lorenzo, you're a ship owner. What route have you chosen to comply with the sulfur cap, and why did you choose that route?
First of all, thank you very much for the question, and let me thank Francesco for this opportunity. In our company, we use both MDO and IFO, because we have a section of our company who's running short distances, and that's where we use MDO, and we have a couple of ships that are running on the cabotage, and those ships are using IFO. We have been the first company to buy a ship that is running on LNG, and that will be deployed in the Strait of Messina in the next month, hopefully. I say hopefully because we are not sure at the moment if we'll be able to fill it up, because there's no set of rules on the bunkering of those kind of ships in Italy at the moment. So we are working on that set of rules. And for the cabotage, we have chosen scrubbers, basically. And we have made those choices for the scrubbers following what the bigger company in Europe are doing. So we basically copied Mr. Grimaldi. So we have implemented his policy, because we do believe that the possible difference in price due to the availability of the fuel, like we don't want to take care of that, since we are a small player on the market, while on the LNG on the other market we are I would say that we are small for being a European company, but we are big for being an Italian company. So there we chose to move as first movers. I have to say that as a ship owner, the cost of the energy we'll be using on our ships in the next years will be higher than now, that's for sure. And that's not the point. The point is we are engaged as everybody in this challenge, which is the reduction of CO2 that is produced in the world. And so we are struggling as all the other industries to implement technologies that are capable of reducing the amount of CO2 that is produced. Those two different technologies, I agree with Mr. Salerno, are bridge solutions, because both LNG and IFO are still producing CO2. It's a good solution, it's a good bridge solution. I do believe that we will go to hydrogen. I do believe that in the future the efficiency of batteries will increase, so we will see probably investments even on that field. I would, if I could spend 20 seconds more on this question, I would say that what is important is not the technology. What is important, and we are this occasion, it's a shipping and the law. The title of this conference says it all. What we need, the technology, it's there, or it will be there in the next years. What we need is a clear set of rules, because as said in the first session of today, our industry, it's an international industry. Yeah. We are competing with the players that are from South Korea, from China, from India, from the United States. We need a set of rules that is shared among all the different players, not only on energy, but I take as an example the water ballast management. We need a clear set of rules, because our industry, it can be compared to heavy industry. The payback period, it's not 6 months as software producers, but it's generally speaking from 15 to 30 years. We need a set of rules that it's clear and that can be used by everybody to compete in a fair way.
Yeah, I was just briefly, of course, unlike people that operate bulk carriers, tankers or box ships, you have a tourist-oriented business. So I was going to ask, maybe your clients want or expect modern passenger shipping companies to be green and clean. Maybe that's good from a marketing point of view.
It is good from a marketing point of view. It is good, I think it's good from a strategic point of view, because I think that a company that invests in those kind of solutions today will have more chances in the future to compete on markets. Following your statement, I would say that yes, people, they might like to use a ship that is producing less CO2, but that's valid even for goods, because it's proven that if you offer, I give you an example, and it's not related to shipping. DHL has a service, they do transport things from A to B. They have two different prices. One price is the normal price, the second price is it's a price that is a little bit higher, and that's because they are starting to use trucks that are running on LNG. So people, they pay more to transport their things from A to B by choosing those trucks, and strangely 80% of people, if they get this question asked, they answer they want to spend more money because...
Right, interesting, yeah, interesting. But having teenage
even
kids...
goods, they make their choices.
No, having teenage kids who always go on at me about my carbon footprint, yeah, I know that that's what the market wants. Yeah. Terry, have you got some questions?
Yes, I've got a couple of thoughts and then some questions. The thoughts are that this idea that ship owners are leaving it very late. And there's a second session that we'll be doing after lunch with more ship owners, so we can go back to this. But Leo's suggestion that ship owners leave everything to the last minute, I mean, you know, I understand why that takes place, but I also think, you know, and I'd like to ask what the panel thinks, is there's an element of irresponsibility about this. There is absolutely no way anyone could have been unaware of the challenges ahead. And the International Maritime Organization might have set targets for carbon of 50% cut by 2050, and ship owners and others and the oil industry may be saying, we can't meet that. The International Panel on Climate Change has just had a report last week, which you'll all be aware of. They're talking about 100% cut in carbon has got to happen by 2050. So there's no ifs and buts about this. We're talking about the future of people's lives on the planet. So this is the future is now. How are we going to deal with this? I'm just, you know, Volkmar, are ship owners kind of woken up to this? Tracy, has the oil industry been completely irresponsible, clinging onto fossil fuels and telling everyone, oh, it's all right, it's business as usual, you don't really need to change? Or, Hugo, you talk about hydrogen. I remember hydrogen buses in London operated by BP on a trial basis 10 years ago. I mean, nothing has happened with hydrogen. It's still not accepted in a general way. How are we going to fast forward ship owners' use of hydrogen out of nowhere? Tracy?
Yes, if I can address some of that. I mean, we've been saying ship owners leave it very late, but actually they were reacting to price signals in the market. They knew the regulation that was coming down, and until Q1 this year, the price signals, the price differential between gas oil and HSFO wasn't great enough to shorten that payout period and incentivize the ship owners to increase the scrubber installations. We tracked some 385 vessels in the middle of March that either had scrubbers installed or had them on order. That number increased by almost 1,000 up until the end of September. And that's when, the price signals still, I mean, are there, but they're not as wide as what we're forecasting to go on in the future. So if you want to bring it back to, it's all a market, and it's all an incentive on people react to the market signals and the commercial signals. So it's very nice to say, I'll pay more for my green transport, but that's not always the case. And then if you take the second point, sometimes you are infrastructure constrained. So this is part of the reason why you talk about LNG as a bridge fuel, but this is part of the reason why LNG hasn't picked up. The first bunker operation from a ship to ship, first one in Rotterdam took place last week, the week before last, right? And Northwest Europe is where the concentration of LNG vessels are. So you are infrastructure constrained. There's one barge on order, LNG barge on order from bunkering in Singapore, right? Even if I'm running a bus service, I'm going to be hesitant to put my vessel on LNG till I've locked in the supply.
But if I may, we have chosen LNG because we run buses. We like my company serves in the Strait of Messina, so our ship is designed to run in the Strait of Messina for its entire life. So it's easier for us. But yes, you're right. I would say that the main problems that we have been facing with LNG are a set of rules and infrastructure. That's it.
Hugo, do you want to have a go at
Thank you. First of all, let me say, I think it is a duty on ship owners to be as late as possible in taking a decision, because the uncertainty is so huge that every decision you take in advance can be produce a big damage to your economy. So, of course, you try to buy as much time as possible in order to make the most informed decision. If we speak about, let's say, energies that are like renewables or like hydrogen, that are energies carbon-free or partly carbon-free, because it's very difficult to imagine a full, let's say, industry that is carbon-free. Even renewables is not carbon-free, because you have to produce the panels, you have to produce the inverters, etc., and you produce carbon also in this. But in any case, if we speak about hydrogen, now we see that there is a much bigger attention of the industry towards hydrogen. As usual, until the industry does not feel that something is of interest, is not investing massively in this type of technology. But once the industry understands that this technology can become acceptable in short or medium term, they start investing. And you perfectly know, because we have seen examples. It's useless that I mention mobile phones or smartphones. Everybody of us knows what does it mean when industry and research is starting to concentrate financial resources on a specific technology. This makes not developments, but quantum leaps. That is something completely different. The speed of change is completely different when the industry starts to invest. Now let's not forget that timing is coming. Think, for example, to Japan. Japan wants to become the world leader in the hydrogen technology. And Japan is, of course, a country that is a forward-looking country. You know that the Olympics of 2020 in Tokyo will be named as the Hydrogen Olympics. And by that date, they will have in Tokyo about 150 refueling stations for hydrogen. They will have about 6,000 cars and a few hundreds of buses running on hydrogen. Of course, this is still not a technology that is ready, because fuel cells, for example, are bigger. They use more volume to produce the same amount of power compared to an engine, or they cost more. But it is a starting point.
Yeah, thank you very much, Hugo. I think Leo has been signalling that he's got something
Yes,
to
if
say.
I may, on this, two remarks. One, hydrogen doesn't exist naturally. You have to make it. And making hydrogen, those who know about it, is expensive. So that's one point that we must bear in mind.
If I may add something.
Yeah, come back, Hugo.
Afterwards, yes.
Come back, Hugo.
The other point, if I may, is that we must draw a distinction between desulfurizing, which is sulfur in fuel exhaust, is definitely a pollutant. Now, CO2 is defined as a pollutant, but with respect, CO2 is never a pollutant. Without CO2, none of us would be around here, the whole world would be completely different. So we must draw a distinction between desulfurizing fuels and decarbonizing an economy, which is a completely different case. And the EU and the IPCC directing the world towards that future is fraught with dangers.
So if I read you correctly, you think that all the talk of a carbon-free future is,
I think it's
for the birds?
Completely for the birds, a pipe dream. Physically also, it's almost impossible. So whoever's advocating that either doesn't understand physics or chemistry or anything.
Right, but as a guy who makes a living from oil industry consultancy, you've got
No,
an
that's not
interest.
fair. I'm an energy consultant. I cover most energies, but you know that's not fair. That's what they address. Usually, the CO2 lobby, if you like, say that you're part of the oil industry. That's true. I was part, but it does. But the truth is the truth. You can't escape it.
Is the truth.
Okay, sorry, Hugo and then Franco.
Leo, if I may respectfully disagree on what you have said. Today, I agree. What you have said is absolutely right. But think to two things. Today, of course, you are speaking about hydrogen production. 95% of production of hydrogen is coming through reformers. So it's extremely expensive. It's heat, it's steam, etc. But we are going towards a world where the energy will be cheaper and cheaper. Think, for example, to the developments of the cost of production of energy in the renewables. For example, in the last 8 years, a renewable installation is costing 73% less. We have seen offers of delivery of photovoltaic power in the Arabian Gulf. Of course, the production in the Arabian Gulf is extremely efficient, but at 3 cents per kilowatt hour, where power produced by fossil fuels is ranging between 5 and 15. We know that the development of technology is going to give us the opportunity to have even more convenient prices. This means that we will be able to produce hydrogen through electrolysis and not through reformers. In addition to that, Leo, it's only a matter of money, because if you want to decarbonize even the fossil fuels, you can capture CO2. It's costing a fortune, I know, but if the world wants this, we will do. But I think, Leo, one of the things that we have to agree upon is that the important is not the absolute cost, but it's the relative cost. If we are speaking about protection of the environment, of course we are all in agreement that maritime transport is the cheapest, the most environmental friendly and the safest. So what we need to do is that the world, the community is not penalizing the sea transport compared to other type of transport, for example, road or if everybody will be obliged to increase enormously its costs, it means that somebody will go out from the market, the companies that are not able to invest, but the mode of transport will remain. And
okay,
this is the real important point,
okay,
I think.
Thank you, Hugo. Leo, do you want a quick comeback on that before I hand over to Franco? Or?
Just a very quick one
very quick
on wind power. Hugo and I had a discussion before, so I'll just mention it, that when we talk about wind power, and people are very keen on it, and it's expanding very rapidly, people don't consider that only 23% of capacity, installed wind power capacity in the world is actually utilized on average. So therefore, in order to rely on wind power electricity, you have to have backup systems. And usually today, the backup is natural gas. So you must bear that in mind. Some countries have higher utilization rates. For example, the United States is up to 30% plus. But others are below 20%. So this is something you must bear in mind. You have to have a whole system backing it up, because the wind basically doesn't blow. Now, I have read that some people are thinking in shipping to go back to wind power. But this is crazy, because we left wind power a century and a half ago for that reason, because it's unreliable. Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
okay, well, Franco, you have the floor, yes.
Important the point of view of the people from fossil fuel, like I am. First of all, what the shipping needs to operate well and efficiency is the energy density of the fuels. The energy density is very important for a shipping industry. And the most high fuel with energy density is liquid fuels. Okay, this is a point. So we now need to desulfurize and decarbonize the liquid fuels. How can we do? If we can produce all the electricity with renewable energy, I agree, we can produce a lot of green hydrogen. And there is a simple process, the Fischer-Tropsch process, that with green hydrogen and CO2 from air can be done a liquid fuel. And liquid fuel is very easy to storage and to use in the shipping industry. So we are not obliged to use a fuel cell. We can produce the so-called e-fuels, electronic fuels, and we can use these fuels totally decarbonized. Yes, this is one point. We are, as oil industry, studying a low carbon pathway to 2050 in order to put on the table all the technologies. And one other technology is carbon storage and capture and utilization. If we can eliminate all the CO2 from our refineries, we have a carbon footprint of the fuel very, very low. We can use biofuels. In our low carbon pathway, we can imagine 30–40% of the demand of liquid fuel can be biofuels. So biofuels and biomethane also is near totally carbon free. All the technology in this way can, in our estimate, have a reduction of the CO2 in 2050 about 80–90%. But the cost is very, very high. I agree totally.
Okay, Volkmar, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, if I may, this is a fantastic intro. As Francesco called the conference, the future is now. If you consider to have equipment on board which would use renewable energies to, for example, as you said, produce CO2 neutral methane that could be burned in an LNG engine, which is available today. So if you invest into an LNG engine today, so you would be ready for burning, let's say, CO2 neutral produced methane in the future. If you produce that on board, could be possible if you have equipment on board to produce the fuel on the vessel, and then you're already complying with the legislation. Of course, it's not the only way. And we talked about batteries capacity. Just let me elaborate a bit. We are thinking also to combine the engine with a shaft generator so that you produce the electricity and then feed into batteries. And if you come to ACAS, then you run the engine PTO, PTI on batteries. But that's, I mean, maybe it's too much for now, but I just wanted to take this up, that these concepts, to put all these concepts together, put them on a vessel, and then you're ready for the future.
Right, well, thanks to Terry for stirring up controversy. Does anyone want the last word on this? Lorenzo?
Not the last word, for sure, but I want to go back to a concept that I've been expressing before. I've listened very carefully to the discussions on hydrogen, on LNG, on scrubbers. I do think that the technology that the world where we come from, which is a world that only used basically MDO and IFO, it's gone. We are going to a world where every company will be implementing a technology depending on the conveniency, of course. I want to go back to the concept where it's not important the kind of technology that you use. You might be using hydrogen, you might be using LNG or biogas, or rowing or wind, whatever it is. What is important is the set of rules. If we share the same set of rules and we are clear on that, then we can plan investments for the future, and we will be achieving the goals that we set year by year. If we don't share the same set of rules, let's make an example. If on, for example, water ballast management, we have 3 different institutions that are producing rules, then the set of rules, the given set of rules is not clear, it's unclear, then you cannot ask ship owners to invest because the set of rules is not clear. Then everything becomes slower and slower. So what I want to underline is that despite the technology that we will be using in the future, I don't know if we will be able to decarbonize totally our economy or if we will not be able to do so. But I'm sure that if we don't share the same amount, the same set of rules, not only we will not achieve the goals that we have set, but most probably we will even make steps back because every Italian company that goes bankrupt because the sector rule is not clear and because they made the wrong investments, there is a Chinese company that is stepping in, and most probably that company is less efficient from an energetic point of view. So I would like to once again to underline the fact that the technology is important, yes, but it's more important the set of rules that is behind it.
Right, well, thank you for that, Lorenzo, and thank you all for that. A fascinating exchange. And we've got about 10 minutes left. I think time for one last question. So, Terry.
Well, I suppose I'd quite like to widen it out. The fact is that whether it's your issue around passengers being willing to pay a green tariff, I mean, these costs are going to have to be passed on. There is little doubt about that. And there's going to be problems doing that. And while I asked whether ship owners weren't being irresponsible by leaving these things so late, there's also a problem not just with the industry, but with people generally. I mean, it is a fact that the richest 10% of the world emit 50% of the carbon emissions, and yet there seems no desire for those usually very highly educated and well-informed people to take responsibility for that and change their lifestyles, to stop flying as much as they do, to eat less meat, and do things that are now commonplace part solutions to the problem. But I do think, Leo, that you are muddying the waters, and those kind of views which are shared by 3% of world scientists, as opposed to 97% who believe that man-made climate change is real. It's irresponsible to promote that view that muddies the waters, that suggests actually things don't need to be done, don't worry about it. It's all a bit of, you know, people are conflating carbon with sulfur. You know, the two issues are important. It is about pollution. But I guess you can have your say. You can return to that. But my wider question is, if it's not an industry issue, if it's a wider issue, and we need to get an acceptance by the public that they're going to have to pay for greening the shipping industry, how do we get that message over?
Well, you're putting on a shocked face, Tracy, so... Yeah.
I didn't turn to you, Leo. I started there.
You opened the question to everybody, so...
We'll give Tracy the floor to begin with.
In essence, isn't this what IMO has already started to do? By on a global basis, saying that we will reduce from 3.5% the limit down to 0.5% sulfur. I mean, this is the largest regulatory or change in a product spec that's been driven by regulations probably ever on a global basis. So actually, I think the shipping industry is starting to be very responsible about it. Now they're talking about greenhouse gas emissions. You don't see the road transport industry talking about this. You don't see governments, even first world governments, coordinating their efforts on it. So I think to come back on the shipping industry and say it's all up to the shippers to do this is probably a bit incorrect and a bit harsh.
Okay,
I could go into more detail.
Leo, come back and put Terry's mind at rest, please.
If I may say just one word in my defense, this is unfair because I didn't argue against CO2. I just drew a distinction between CO2 and the desulfurization problem. And I think that's fair and quite true. So if you want to go into the CO2, that's another debate and we need more time.
Okay, Franco, do you want to defend the honor of the oil industry?
If we speak of desulfurization, I can add a technical point because we don't have only the cost of the problem. The problem is also the compatibility of the product. We will risk to have around the world different fuel that each other are not compatible each other. And this could create big damage to the, I imagine, of the oil industry from one side and the shipping industry on the other side. So when the rules are set, every problem around the rules need to be evaluated very strictly, because this problem of the compatibility will be one of the main problems that we have to address in the near future.
Well, Volkmar, can the engineering industry save the planet and deliver technologies that are green and clean and still power ships?
Short answer, yes.
Yes. And a slightly longer answer.
So say again?
Slightly longer answer. How are you going to do it?
Yes, I would like to come. It's maybe not an engineering point of view, but come back to Terry's statement. We had that. We heard it before in the session, so I think it's a question of us, society, how we deal with it. I mean, my shirt. I don't know where my shirt comes from and how many times it traveled around the globe. Is globalization staying as it is, or do we go back to more localization? It's against my industry, because then I can't sell any engines anymore. But that's maybe the question for the very, very long view. For the short view, I think I somehow admire Leo's physics theory, and I fully understand that, but I can't just, as you said, Terry, sit here and do nothing, but we have to somehow protect our planet, and the technology will be there. The question is now, what drives technology? Is technology driven by legislation, or is technology driven by research? I think it's a combination, and at the moment I fully understand and support your statement that we need clear rules, clear definitions, also clear specifications of fuels. The last disaster in Houston spread out to Singapore, destroying all the engines with bad fuel. What is going on with the 0.5 sulfur fuel? Who's blended it? It's from the refineries. Is there any specification around? We see that this fuel is somehow mixed, bad and good. It will affect shipping. So we need clear rules. I can just emphasize this, and this will also then drive innovation in technology.
Okay, Lorenzo, what do you think of this? Who's right?
Once again, I do think that the technology is there, and it's a matter of price. Prices are, we all share the same prices. I do go back to my point. It's a set of rules. That's it. Yeah. That's all about it. It's the rules we share. It's the more we have common rules, and the more those rules are stable and clear, the less the implementation of those kind of technology will cost. The faster this process will happen. So.
Okay, and with less than 2 minutes left on the clock, I'll give Ugo the privilege of having the last word. Well, what would you say, Ugo?
That's very kind of you. It is because of my age, I think you are doing this, and I am very grateful. Two things. One, Lorenzo is insisting on rules. I 100% agree, but I think that rules must be above the various industries. So rules must be established into these meetings like COP, for example, so the Paris or the Bonn, etc., because all the industries must be treated in the same way as far as their footprint is concerned. Otherwise, we are going to penalize one industry compared to the other, and maybe we are making the wrong choice, because if we penalize marine, is what I told you before. Second point, I was listening to what was said by Terry, is we need to think about our uses and the use of energy. Let's not forget, I think it was the World Economic Forum who is forecasting a growth of 25% of energy, primary energy need within 2040. So no way. We will have a lot of people that will improve their living standards. 8 cars per 100 person in China, 82 in US. This is an imbalance that will not continue. So we will see more use of energy. The only way forward is to invest in technology and to find, and it is what we are seeing from oil majors. Oil majors are changing completely their policy, even their image. BP is beyond petroleum. Statoil is Equinor. They are heavily investing into renewables, into wind, etc. Not because they want to benefit the humans, but because they think it's a good investment. So we need to understand that it is a good investment for the community.
Thank you very much for that, Ugo. Ladies and gentlemen, I thought that was an absolutely exceptional panel discussion. So please can we have a round of applause for these guys? Thank you.